Millionaire falls in love with a receptionist in a wheelchair, and his attitude surprises everyone. The TechVision Solutions office in Austin was buzzing with the usual hustle and bustle of a Monday morning when Nicholas Morgan stopped abruptly in the lobby. His eyes fixed on the new receptionist who, with precise and graceful movements, navigated her wheelchair between the reception desk and the digital filing cabinet, organizing documents with remarkable efficiency. "Mr. Morgan, good morning." Dakota Williams smiled, her green eyes shining with an intensity that caught him off guard. "Your reports from the 9 o'clock meeting are already organized, and I've set the updates on the Henderson project to your tablet." Nicholas tried to disguise his surprise. After 3 weeks away on business trips, he hadn't expected to find such significant changes in his company. His old receptionist, Mrs. Patterson, had retired after 15 years of service, and now in her place was this young woman who seemed to bring a new energy to the environment. "Impressive, Miss Williams," he replied, unconsciously adjusting his navy blue tie. "I see Rebecca has made an excellent choice in her hiring." Dakota nodded, her hands resting gently on the wheels of her chair. "Your HR director has a keen eye for talent. Although," she smiled with a touch of humor, "I imagine my Paralympic medal weighed a little on the decision." The revelation struck Nicholas like a thunderbolt. He knew that face from somewhere. The London Paralympics, 2012. Dakota Williams had been one of the stars of the American swimming team, winning 3 gold medals before a car accident changed her career 2 years later. The day passed normally, but Nicholas found himself watching Dakota through the glass walls of his office on the 10th floor. There was something in his movements, a quiet determination that went beyond the simple execution of administrative tasks. During his coffee break, he saw her scribbling something in a notebook, completely absorbed in her drawings. It was during a particularly busy afternoon that chance revealed Dakota's secret. Nicholas was leaving the office late when he noticed that she had dropped a briefcase while putting her belongings away. Papers scattered across the floor, among them detailed blueprints of an exoskeleton with impressively precise technical notes. "This is," he began, helping her pick up the papers. "My personal project," Dakota interrupted, a blush tinging her cheeks. "I've always been fascinated by biomechanical engineering, even before the accident. Now, well," she hesitated, "let's just say I have a unique perspective on the subject." Nicholas examined the drawings with growing interest. As the CEO of a technology company, he recognized innovation when he saw it, and this was revolutionary. The design was unlike anything else on the market, lighter, more adaptable, with a neural control system that seemed decades ahead of its time. "You developed this yourself?" Dakota nodded, carefully organizing the papers. "In my garage. It's not much, but it's extraordinary," Nicholas interrupted her, his brain already calculating possibilities. "Dakota, have you considered developing this professionally?" The silence that followed was filled with unspoken possibilities. Dakota looked at her drawings, then at Nicholas, a mixture of hope and skepticism in her gaze. "It's always been my dream," she admitted, "but I need resources, a team, facilities. How about a whole division?" The words came out before Nicholas could stop them, but he didn't regret it. His instinct for business rarely deceived him, and something told him that he was looking at something transformative. Dakota's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious," Nicholas replied, pulling up a chair to sit at her level. "TechVision has always sought innovation, but this could change lives." The moment was interrupted by the janitor, who came in to start his evening routine. Dakota quickly put her projects away, but Nicholas could see that her hands were shaking slightly with excitement. "Think about it," he said, standing up. "Tomorrow we could discuss the details over lunch if you like." Dakota agreed, a smile lighting up her face. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan." "Nicholas," he corrected. "You could call me Nicholas." As he drove home that evening, Nicholas couldn't get Dakota's projects out of his mind and the sparkle in his eyes when he talked about them. In 15 years leading TechVision, he had learned to recognize not only good ideas but also exceptional people. Dakota Williams was both. In his apartment, he spent hours researching her. The articles about her Paralympic achievements were impressive, but what intrigued him most were her academic publications on biomechanics, written during her recovery from the accident. There was a brilliant mind behind those green eyes. one that combined practical experience with technical knowledge in a unique way. Nicholas knew he was about to do something risky. Creating a new division around an experimental project was not a decision the board would approve easily. But as he reread Dakota's notes, he was certain some bets were worth the risk, especially when they had the potential to change the world. What he didn't yet know was that this decision would change not only his company, but also his life in ways he could never have predicted. The next morning, Dakota arrived at TechVision earlier than usual. His hands were shaking slightly as he organized the exoskeleton designs into a more professional presentation. Years of solitary work in his garage could finally take wing, and that prospect was equally exciting and frightening. Nicholas hadn't been able to sleep properly either. He spent most of the night reviewing financial reports and mentally structuring how he would present the proposal to the board. When he entered the office at 7 in the morning, he found Dakota already at her desk, completely absorbed in her work. "I'm still holding the invitation for lunch," he said, approaching with 2 coffees in hand. "I thought you might need it." Dakota smiled, accepting the drink. "Thanks. I spent the evening refining some details of the project." "Actually," she hesitated, "I'd like to show you something before lunch. I have a working prototype in my garage." The revelation took Nicholas by surprise. "A working prototype? I thought it was still in the design phase." "I've been working on it for 3 years," she explained. "It's not perfect, but it proves that the concept works. If you want, I can show it to you during your lunch break. I only live 15 minutes away." Nicholas consulted his digital calendar. "I have a video conference in 30 minutes, but then I'm free until 2. How about we go as soon as I've finished?" The rest of the morning dragged on with agonizing slowness for both of them. Nicholas found it hard to concentrate on the video conference with the Seattle investors, his mind constantly drifting back to the projects he had seen the night before. Dakota, for her part, alternated between her regular tasks and minor adjustments to her notes. At 11:30, they left the office in Nicholas' Tesla Model S. Dakota drove him to a modest but well-kept residential neighborhood with typical Texan-style houses. His garage had been completely transformed into a makeshift laboratory, with tools organized methodically on the walls and a central work area dominated by electronic equipment. "Impressive," Nicholas muttered, observing the meticulous organization of the space. "Did you set this up yourself?" "Most of it," Dakota replied, moving her chair to a corner covered by a tarpaulin. "My father is a mechanic, so I learned a lot from him. After the accident, I started applying that knowledge in a different way." With a decisive movement, she removed the tarpaulin, revealing the exoskeleton. It was more elegant than Nicholas had imagined, with a minimalist design that seemed almost organic. Smooth lines of titanium and carbon fiber intertwined in a structure that promised both strength and flexibility. "The difference isn't a neural control system," Dakota explained, pointing to small sensors along the structure. "Most of today's exoskeletons rely on external commands or pre-programmed patterns. This one learns from the user, adapting to natural movement patterns." Nicholas approached, examining the impeccable craftsmanship. "Did you test it?" "Yes," she replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "I can show you." The next 20 minutes were a revelation. Dakota demonstrated how the exoskeleton attached to her legs and hips, explaining each component as she put it on. The startup system was almost silent, with only a slight hum indicating that it was operational. "The first time I managed to stand up in it," she shared as the exoskeleton gently lifted her, "I cried for a whole hour. Not for the position itself, but for realizing that I could help other people to have that same feeling." Nicholas watched in amazement as she took a few steps. The movements were fluid, natural, different from the robotic movements he was used to seeing in other exoskeletons. "How long is the battery?" 6 hours with continuous use," she replied, returning to her chair. "I still need to improve the energy efficiency and reduce the weight, but the basic principles work." Nicholas was already doing mental calculations. "We'll need a team of biomechanical engineers, neural interface specialists, industrial designers." He paused, realizing he was getting ahead of himself. "Sorry, I'm assuming you want to get on with it." Dakota laughed, a soft, musical sound that echoed through the garage. "After seeing your reaction? Definitely." But she hesitated. I want to keep creative control of the project. This is more than a product for me, it's a dream. I'd expect nothing less, Nicholas nodded. How about we discuss the details over lunch? I know a great Italian restaurant a few blocks from here. Over lunch at Bellinate, they outlined the first steps of what would become TechVision's assistive technology division. Nicholas was impressed by Dakota's technical knowledge, which went far beyond what her CV suggested. She had a clear vision, not only of the product, but of how it could evolve. You know, she commented, playing with her ravioli, when Rebecca hired me as a receptionist, I thought I was giving up on my dream. Now I realized that maybe it was fate that put me in the right place. Nicholas watched her for a moment, noticing how the light from the restaurant highlighted the golden tones in her brown hair. Sometimes the best dates are the ones we don't plan. The comment hung between them, loaded with unspoken meanings. Dakota blushed slightly, looking away from her plate. Nicholas snorted, turning his attention to the practical aspects of the project. When they returned to the office, something had subtly changed between them. It wasn't just the excitement of the Joy project, but a mutual awareness that went beyond a professional. Nicholas found himself watching the way Dakota smiled when he answered the phone, while she noticed how he ran his hand through his hair when he was concentrating. The rest of the afternoon was spent preparing the presentation for the board, scheduled for the following week. As they worked side by side in the conference room, Nicholas realized that he had found not only a promising project, but someone who shared his passion for making a difference in the world. As the sun set over Austin, casting golden shadows through the office windows, they both knew they were at the beginning of a journey that would change not only their careers, but their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The TechVision boardroom was as silent as a cathedral as Dakota finished her presentation. Nicholas, sitting at the head of the table, watched the expressions of the 12 board members, trying to decipher their reactions to the numbers and projections that covered the screen. As you can see, Dakota concluded, her voice steady despite the nervousness Nicholas knew she was feeling. The market potential for a neural adaptive exoskeleton exceeds $5 billion by 2025. Robert Chun, the company's CFO, was the first to speak up. Impressive, Miss Williams. But establishing an entire division for a single product is a considerable risk. We already have established projects which don't offer even a tenth of the potential for innovation that we're seeing here. Nicholas interrupted, standing up. The prototype is already more advanced than anything on the market, and that was developed in a garage. A very well-equipped garage. Mara Foster, R&D director, commented with a smile. I must admit that the neural integration you've developed is remarkable. How did you overcome the problem of latency that affects most similar systems? Dakota maneuvered his chair over to the laptop, opening a new set of slides. I developed an adaptive learning algorithm that the technical discussion that followed lasted almost 2 hours. Nicholas watched with pride as Dakota answered each question with precision and confidence, his in-depth knowledge of the subject evident with each explanation. When the meeting finally ended, the board voted 8-4 in favor of the project. Dakota would be appointed Director of Development for the new Assistive Technology Division with an initial budget of $20 million. Congratulations, Nicholas smiled, meeting her in the hallway after the meeting. You completely won them over. I still can't believe it, she replied, her hands trembling slightly on the wheels of her chair. 3 weeks ago, I was just a receptionist, and now you're an executive who's going to revolutionize the industry, he added, leaning closer. How about we celebrate? I know a great place downtown that serves the best bourbon in Austin. The bar and kitchen was an elegant establishment in the heart of the city, with soft lighting and live jazz. Nicholas had reserved a discreet table on the mezzanine, accessible by elevator. So, he began after the waiter had poured their drinks. How does it feel to officially be a TechVision executive? Dakota gently swirled her glass, observing the amber liquid. Honestly, terrified and ecstatic at the same time. After the accident, I thought I'd missed my chance to do something meaningful. What exactly happened? Nicholas asked softly. It was the first time they had directly broached the subject of the accident. Dakota took a deep breath. It was after a training session in 2014. I was on my way home when a truck lost control in the rain. The doctor said I was lucky. It could have been much worse. But at that moment, seeing my medals on the hospital wall, It felt like my life was over. Nicholas reached out, lightly touching his fingers on the table. And yet, you turned that experience into something extraordinary. It wasn't easy, she admitted, not withdrawing her hand. For the first few months, I could barely get out of bed. It was my younger sister, Ashley, who dragged me into engineering school. If you can't swim, build something amazing, she said. The conversation flowed naturally, moving between personal and professional topics. Nicholas talked about the death of his parents in a plane crash when he was 25 and how this led him to take over the family business prematurely. Dakota shared stories of her Paralympic competitions, the moments of glory and the difficulties behind the scenes. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere between them became more intimate. There was something magnetic about the way Dakota gestured as she talked about her projects, her green eyes shining with passion. Nicholas found himself memorizing every detail. The way she tilted her head when she laughed, the small, almost imperceptible scar above her left eyebrow. You know, she said after a moment of comfortable silence, I've always wondered why you decided to take such a risk on this project. Tech vision is your life, and you've taken a huge gamble on an idea developed in a garage. Nicholas watched her for a long moment before answering. Because I recognized something in you that went beyond the project, a determination, a vision, and perhaps something else that I'm still trying to understand. The air between them was filled with unspoken possibilities. Dakota felt her heart racing, aware of the fine line they were beginning to cross between the professional and the personal. Nicholas, she began, her voice soft, we need to be careful. The board is already apprehensive about the project, and if they think there's something more, You're right, he agreed, reluctantly. The project needs to be our priority now. But even as they said the right words, they both knew that something had irreversibly changed between them. The challenge now would be to balance their growing professional responsibilities with the feelings that were beginning to blossom. When Nicholas dropped her off at home that evening, the brief moment when their gazes met carried more meaning than all the words spoken over dinner. The future was full of promises and complications, and neither of them knew exactly how to navigate it. The transformation of TechVision's 12th floor into a biomechanical development laboratory happened surprisingly quickly. In just 2 weeks, the space previously occupied by cubicles was completely remodeled. Dakota watched in amazement as technicians installed state-of-the-art equipment that made her old garage look primitive by comparison. What do you think? Nicholas asked, approaching quietly from behind her. The 3D scanners arrive tomorrow, and the rapid prototyping chamber is already operational. It's surreal, Dakota replied, swiveling her chair to face him. But the most exciting part is the team you've managed to assemble. Dr. Zhang from MIT, Dr. Rodriguez from Johns Hopkins. These are people I used to coordinate my research. The initial team comprised 15 experts, carefully selected from prestigious institutions and competing companies. Most of them had accepted the invitation as soon as they saw the Dakota prototype in action. Speaking of the team, Nicholas checked his watch. Our first official meeting starts in 5 minutes. Ready to take on your leadership role? Dakota felt a chill in her stomach. It was one thing to work alone in your garage, but quite another to lead a team of renowned scientists. What if they don't take me seriously? After all, until a few weeks ago, I was a receptionist. Nicholas crouched beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. They'll respect you for the same reason I do. You're genius. Besides, he smiled, you've won 3 Paralympic gold medals. That takes more discipline and determination than any PhD. The conference room was packed when they entered. Dakota positioned her chair at the head of the table, with Nicholas discreetly taking a seat next to her. She took a deep breath and began, Welcome to TechVision's Assistive Technology Division. We're here to revolutionize not only exoskeleton technology, but the very way we approach assistive mobility. As she presented the technical details of the project, Nicholas watched with pride as the scientist's initial apprehension turned into genuine interest and respect. Dakota mastered the subject with an authority that came not only from theoretical knowledge, but from lived experience. The key to our system, she explained, drawing out detailed diagrams, lies in adaptive synaptic integration. Instead of just responding to commands, The exoskeleton learns and adapts to each user's unique neural patterns. Dr. Jean raised his hand. Impressive, but how did you solve the problem of neural fatigue that usually affects similar systems? What followed was an in-depth technical discussion that left Nicholas alternating between admiration and confusion. Dakota not only answered the most complex questions, but also proposed innovative solutions to problems that the team hadn't even considered yet. After the meeting, as the team dispersed into small, animated groups, Nicholas noticed Dakota discreetly wiping away a tear. "Hey," he approached worriedly, "is everything okay?" "More than fine," she smiled, her eyes sparkling. "It's just that for so long it was just a lonely dream. To see all these brilliant minds enthusiastic about the project, wanting to contribute, it's overwhelming." "You deserve it," Nicholas replied softly. "And so much more." The moment was interrupted by Rebecca, the HR director, who rushed into the room. "Nicholas, we need you at the meeting with the Singaporean investors. And Dakota, Dr. Rodriguez is looking for you to discuss the materials resistance tests." The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Dakota immersed himself in technical discussions with his team, while Nicholas balanced the demands of the new division with his regular responsibilities as CEO. It wasn't until late afternoon, when most of the staff had left, that they met again in the lab. Dakota was engrossed in tweaking the prototype when Nicholas approached with 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you'd have gone home by now," she commented, gratefully accepting the drink. "I could say the same," he replied, observing the modifications she was making. "Any progress?" "We've reduced the weight by 15% without compromising the structure," she explained excitedly. Dr. Jean suggested a new titanium alloy that could revolutionize the whole design. Nicholas watched her work, noting how she seemed completely in her element among the high-tech equipment. There was a natural gracefulness to her movements, even confined to her wheelchair, that fascinated him more and more. "Dakota," he began hesitantly, "I know we agreed to keep things strictly professional, but Nicholas," she interrupted him gently, swiveling her chair to face him. "I've been thinking about it too. A lot, but we have so much at stake here. This project could change lives." "What if we could have both?" he asked, his voice low but intense. "The project and us?" The silence that followed was charged with possibilities and unspoken fears. Dakota looked at the exoskeleton prototype, then back at Nicholas. "It wouldn't be easy," she finally replied. "The council, the team, the press, everyone would be watching us. Since when do you take the easy way out?" Nicholas smiled, reminding her of their journeys so far. Dakota couldn't help but smile in response. "Touché, but we need to be careful. This project is bigger than both of us." "Then we'll be careful," he agreed, reaching out to lightly touch her hand. One step at a time, the touch sent shivers through them both, an electric current, a possibility that promised as much as it threatened. As the sun set over Austin, painting the lab in golden hues, they stood there, on the threshold of something new and frightening, but potentially wonderful. The buzz in the technology press was growing by the day. In just 1 month, TechVision's new assistive technology division had become the most talked about topic in Silicon Valley. Dakota's story, from receptionist to CEO, combined with her past as a Paralympic athlete, captured the public's imagination. Tech Insider wants an exclusive interview, Rebecca informed during the morning meeting. Forbes, Wired, and MIT Technology Review are also lining up. "Your story is going viral, Dakota." Dakota sighed, adjusting her posture in her chair. "The focus should be on the project, not on me." "You're part of the story," Nicholas interjected gently. "Your personal experience lends credibility and humanity to the project." "Besides," he smiled, "no one can explain the technology better than its creator." The latest tests of the prototype had exceeded all expectations. Dr. Jean and his team managed to reduce the total weight by 30%, while Dr. Rodriguez developed a new tactile feedback system that allowed users to feel the terrain through the exoskeleton. During a particularly promising test session, Dakota decided to personally demonstrate the advances to the team. With the help of 2 technicians, she transferred to the updated exoskeleton. "The neural adaptive sensors have been recalibrated," she explained as the system booted up. "The response should be more." Her words were interrupted by her own surprise when the exoskeleton lifted her. The movement was different, smoother, more natural than any previous version. Dakota took a few experimental steps, amazed at the fluidity. Nicholas, watching from the lab door, felt his heart race. There was something deeply moving about seeing Dakota standing there, her eyes shining with a mixture of scientific pride and personal emotion. "Incredible," Dr. Zhang murmured, checking the readings on his tablet. "The latency is practically zero. It's as if a system is actually connected to your nervous system." Dakota walked around the room, carrying out a series of mobility tests. Every movement was recorded and analyzed by dozens of sensors, providing precious data for future improvements. "Energy consumption has also decreased significantly," Dr. Rodriguez noted. "With these specifications, we could increase autonomy to 10 hours. After the tests, while the team was excitedly discussing the results, Nicholas found Dakota alone in the control room, still wearing the exoskeleton. "You're glowing," he commented, closing the door softly behind him. "It's amazing," she replied, gracefully turning to face him. "Each version gets closer to natural movement. Soon, people like me will be able to—" Her voice faltered with emotion, and before Nicholas realized what he was doing, he had crossed the room and wrapped her in his arms. For a moment, they stood like that, Dakota upright thanks to the exoskeleton, her head resting on his shoulder. "Nicholas," she whispered, her body trembling slightly, "this is dangerous." "I know," he replied, but he didn't let go. "But I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel what I feel." The sound of voices in the hallway made them separate quickly. Dakota returned to her wheelchair with practical and efficient movements, but her hands were shaking slightly. The rest of the day passed in a haze of meetings and technical demonstrations. The first public presentation of the exoskeleton was scheduled for 2 weeks from now at the TechVision Innovate conference, and preparations took up most of everyone's time. In the late afternoon, after most of the team had left, Dakota found a small package on his desk. Inside was a USB stick with a handwritten note, "For when you need inspiration." And at home, she connected the device to her laptop. It was a compilation of videos, her Paralympic competitions, reports on her medals, and at the end a clip she had never seen before, Nicholas talking about her at an investors' meeting. "What makes the project extraordinary," his voice sounded clear through the speakers, "is not just the technology, but the vision behind it. Dakota Williams isn't just building a product, she's redefining possibilities. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what TechVision has always stood for." Dakota felt tears run down her face. The phone on her desk vibrated with a message. "I've watched these videos thousands of times over the last few weeks. You inspire me every day." She hesitated for a moment before replying, "Come here. We need to talk." 30 minutes later, Nicholas was at her door. Dakota led him to her work area, where the original prototype still occupied a prominent place. "This started out as my personal dream," she began, her voice soft but firm. "Now it's bigger than both of us. If anything goes wrong between us—" "Nothing will go wrong," Nicholas interrupted, kneeling beside her chair. "You can't guarantee that," she replied. "And if it does go wrong, I can't let it affect the project. There are thousands of people waiting for this technology." Nicholas nodded slowly. "Then let's make it work. Not just for us, but for everyone who depends on it." The silence that followed was filled with unspoken promises and unexpressed fears. Dakota reached out, gently touching his face. "One step at a time?" she asked, a small smile playing on her lips. "One step at a time," he agreed, turning his face to kiss her palm. As night fell over Austin, two hearts beat in sync, balancing between the personal and the professional, between desire and responsibility, between fear and hope. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it looked promising in more ways than one. The TechVision Innovate conference turned the Austin Convention Center into a technological anthill. Thousands of people circulated between futuristic stands, but the most intense buzz was concentrated around the main stage, where the presentation of the exoskeleton was scheduled to take place in an hour. Backstage, Dakota nervously adjusted her navy blue blouse, while the makeup team put the finishing touches to it. The live broadcast would reach millions of viewers around the world. The neural adaptive sensors have been checked 3 times. Dr. Zhang reported, consulting his tablet. Everything is working perfectly. Thank you, Dakota replied, trying to control her breathing. Where is Nicholas? As if summoned by her words, he appeared at the dressing room door, impeccable in his graphite suit. I've just checked the auditorium. It's packed, and there are at least 200 accredited journalists. Their gazes met through the mirror, a silent current of energy passing between them. In the 2 weeks since that night in his garage, they had kept their promise of one step at a time, although each interaction seemed charged with deeper meanings. 5 minutes, a stagehand announced, poking his head through the door. Nicholas approached Dakota, leaning in to whisper, "You're gonna shine out there. Remember, you're not just the presenter. You're living proof that this works." The moment was interrupted by Rebecca, who rushed in with a file in hand. "Last speech check. Everything ready?" Dakota nodded, moving her chair towards the backstage area. The familiar buzz of the exoskeleton being prepared by the technical team calmed her somehow. This she knew. This was her territory. The stage lights dimmed, and Nicholas' voice filled the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tech Vision Innovate 2024. Today, we're not just presenting new technology, we're redefining possibilities." Dakota took a deep breath as the technical team helped her into position in the exoskeleton. The system booted up silently, and she felt the familiar neural connection take hold. "Please welcome Dakota Williams, director of our Assistive Technology Division," Nicholas announced, and the audience erupted in applause. The moment Dakota emerged from the aisles, walking smoothly with the exoskeleton, would be immortalized in dozens of photographs and viral videos. The entire auditorium was completely silent for a few seconds, before exploding into a standing ovation. "Good morning," she began, her voice firm into the microphone. 3 years ago, in a garage in Austin, I began to dream of this moment. Not just for me, but for millions of people around the world who face mobility challenges. As she demonstrated the capabilities of the exoskeleton, making movements that looked completely natural, the cameras captured every detail. Nicholas, watching from the side of the stage, noticed how she seemed perfectly at ease in the spotlight. A born leader who had finally found her stage. The technical presentation was followed by a question-and-answer session that made clear the depth of Dakota's knowledge. She answered complex questions about neural interfacing, energy efficiency, and adaptive algorithms with a clarity that made the concepts accessible even to non-experts. Miss Williams, a Wall Street Journal journalist, stood up. "Your personal story is remarkable. From Paralympic athlete to technology CEO. How did that journey influence the development of the exoskeleton?" Dakota paused, her eyes briefly meeting Nicholas before answering. "Every challenge I've faced has helped me better understand not just the technical needs, but the human aspect of assistive technology. This isn't just a product, it's a bridge between limitations and possibilities." After the presentation, the TechVision stand was flooded with investors, journalists, and potential partners. Dakota alternated between technical demonstrations and interviews, while Nicholas dealt with corporate and commercial issues. It wasn't until late afternoon, when most of the audience had already left, that they found a moment of privacy in the convention center's VIP room. "You were amazing," Nicholas smiled, handing her a glass of champagne. "The internet is exploding. #TechVisionXO is already trending worldwide." Dakota accepted the drink, still processing the day's events. It still seems surreal. All those people, the questions, the interest, it's more than I ever imagined. "And that's just the beginning," he replied, taking a seat next to her. "The main rehabilitation hospitals have already shown interest. 3 universities want research partnerships." "Nicholas," she began, her voice soft, "thank you for believing in me, in the project, in us." The moment was charged with restrained emotion. Nicholas leaned in slightly, his fingers brushing hers on the arm of the chair. "Dakota, The door opened abruptly, and Rebecca entered with a group of Japanese executives. "Sorry to interrupt, but Fujitsu wants to discuss distribution possibilities in Asia." The rest of the evening was a whirlwind of meetings and negotiations. When they finally left the convention center, Austin's full moon bathed the city in silver light. "Can I drive you home?" Nicholas offered, his keys jingling in his hands. Dakota hesitated for a moment, aware of the electricity in the air between them. "Yes," she finally replied. "I think we both deserve to celebrate properly." As they drove through the nighttime streets of Austin, the silence in the car was comfortable, charged with promise and possibility. The day had been a milestone, not only for TechVision, but for them personally. The future was opening up in front of them, bright and full of potential, like the city lights reflected in the windshield. The morning after the TechVision Innovate conference dawned with a meteor explosion. The video of Dakota demonstrating the exoskeleton had gone viral, surpassing 10 million views in less than 12 hours. TechVision's shares soared 27% as soon as the stock market opened. CNN in 10 minutes, Good Morning America at noon, and Forbes wants a photo shoot for the cover of the next issue, Rebecca listed, running her fingers across the screen of her tablet as she walked beside Dakota's chair down the 12th floor corridor. "Can we just focus on product development?" Dakota sighed, stopping next to her new executive office, still partially in the process of being decorated. "Not when you've become the new face of assistive technology," Nicholas commented, emerging from an adjacent meeting room. "Investors love a good story, and yours, well, it sells dreams and possibilities." Dakota was about to reply when Dr. Zhang burst into the hallway, his eyes shining with that characteristic intensity that emerged whenever he made an important discovery. "Miss Williams, we did it," he exclaimed, practically dancing around his tablet. "The new deep learning algorithm has reduced the neural adaptation time to less than 2 hours. It's a revolutionary breakthrough." The scientist's excitement was contagious. Dakota quickly maneuvered her chair towards the lab, with Nicholas and Rebecca on her heels. The screen showed performance graphs that would make any biomedical engineer's heart race. "This means that new users will be able to master the exoskeleton much more quickly," Dakota explained to Rebecca, who was trying to decipher the technical data. "It's as if the system learns to speak each person's unique neural language in a matter of minutes, not days. We need to document this properly before the FDA meeting," Nicholas noted, already thinking about the next regulatory steps. "Dakota, could you?" A sentence was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. In the adjacent lab, one of the prototypes had fallen during a stress test, scattering components all over the floor. "Damn," Dakota muttered, moving quickly to assess the damage. As she made a sharp turn, her chair hit a table, knocking over more equipment. Nicholas reacted instinctively, moving to help, but Dakota held up a hand, stopping him. "I can handle this," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "I had to learn to deal with accidents a long time ago. The moment carried more weight than it seemed to." Nicholas watched as she methodically retrieved each component, its efficiency a silent reminder of years of adapting and overcoming. "Meeting with Fujitsu in 5 minutes," Rebecca reminded him softly, breaking the tension of the moment. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of appointments. Between interviews and meetings, Dakota barely had time to breathe, let alone process the dizzying changes in her life. It was only in the late afternoon, during a break between appointments, that she found a quiet moment in her new office. "I thought I'd find you here," Nicholas said, quietly entering with 2 cups of coffee. "You usually hide when you need to fake." Dakota accepted the coffee with a tired smile. "That obvious?" "To me, yes," he replied, taking a seat in the armchair opposite her desk. "What's worrying you?" She turned her chair towards the window, looking out at the Austin skyline. "It's all so intense. Yesterday, I was just a scientist trying to make a difference. Today I'm some kind of symbol, a story of overcoming that everyone wants to sell." "You're much more than a story," Nicholas said softly, getting up to come closer. "You're a visionary who's changing lives." And he hesitated briefly. "You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met." Dakota turned her chair to face him, aware of the closeness between them. "Nicholas, we need to be careful. With everything happening so fast, I know," he interrupted gently, "but I can't and won't ignore what's growing between us." The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Rodriguez entered with new test data, followed by a marketing team eager to discuss the next phase of dissemination. In the evening, after the last appointment of the day, Dakota found a small package on his desk. Inside was a 3D printed miniature of the first prototype she had developed in her garage, along with a note to remember where you started and dream of where you can go. And, smiling, she picked up her phone. Still awake? The answer came almost instantly. Always for you. Come to my lab. I want to show you something. 15 minutes later, Nicholas found her in the darkened laboratory, illuminated only by the lights of the equipment. Dakota was wearing the exoskeleton, making adjustments on a computer terminal. Remember when you said that each version gets closer to natural movement? She asked, turning to him. I want you to see that. With fluid grace, she began to move through the space. It wasn't just steps. It was almost a dance, each movement as natural as that of anyone without physical limitations. It's incredible, Nicholas whispered, amazed not only by the technology, but by the determination and beauty of the woman in front of him. That, Dakota said softly, stopping next to him, is just the beginning. Their gazes met in the half-light of the lab, and for a moment, all the complexities of the outside world, the media pressure, the corporate expectations, the technical challenges, seemed to fade away. They were just two people, connected by something deeper than technological innovation or professional success. One step at a time, Nicholas asked, repeating the words that had become his private mantra. One step at a time, Dakota agreed, allowing herself, for the first time, to imagine a future where her professional and personal dreams could coexist perfectly. The success of TechVision's exoskeleton attracted not only the attention of the media and investors, but also an unexpected kind of interest. One particularly hectic morning, Dakota found her inbox flooded with emails from rehabilitation centers and families of potential users. Look at this, she called out to Nicholas, who was passing by her office. A girl from Minnesota, 12 years old, paralyzed after a car accident. Her mother saw our presentation and her voice faltered as she read the rest of the email. Nicholas approached, gently placing his hand on her shoulder as he read the message. They're asking if we could include her in the pilot program, Dakota continued, discreetly wiping away a tear. There are dozens of stories like that. People who saw hope in what we created. Then let's give them that hope, Nicholas replied, his voice soft but determined. We can set up a controlled testing program, starting with selected cases. The suggestion triggered a series of meetings with TechVision's newly hired medical team. Dr. Jean and Dr. Rodriguez worked on specific adaptations of the exoskeleton for different types of paralysis, while Dakota immersed herself in endless planning sessions. It was during one of these sessions that Ashley, Dakota's younger sister, showed up unannounced at the office. Surprise, she exclaimed, hugging Dakota. I've come to see for myself this revolution you're causing. Mom keeps showing your videos to everyone in Minneapolis. Ashley was the younger, more outgoing version of Dakota, with the same intense green eyes, but an easier smile. Her presence brought a different energy to TechVision's corporate environment. So, Ashley commented over lunch after a tour of the lab. You and the handsome CEO? Is there something I should know? Dakota almost choked on his salad. Ashley, it's complicated. What's complicated? Nicholas asked, approaching their table in the cafeteria with his own lunch. Oh, perfect. Ashley smiled mischievously. I was just asking my sister about you too. The moment of embarrassment was saved by Nicholas' phone ringing. It was Rebecca, informing him of an emergency with investors. He excused himself and left quickly, but not before casting a meaningful glance at Dakota. You're in love with him, Ashley declared as soon as Nicholas was out of reach. It wasn't a question. It's more complex than that, Dakota sighed. There's the project, the responsibilities, the company image. And there's you in him, Ashley interrupted. I've seen the way you look at each other. It's the same look you had before every Paralympic competition, determined, but with a touch of fear of the unknown. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Jean, who needed Dakota's approval for changes to the testing protocol. The rest of the afternoon was consumed by technical and administrative issues, but Ashley's words echoed in his mind. In the evening, while most of the staff had already left, Dakota remained in the lab, testing adjustments to the exoskeleton. The soft sound of the servo motors and the glow of the monitoring screens created an almost meditative atmosphere. Your sister is very perceptive, Nicholas' voice sounded from the doorway. making her smile. And completely unfiltered, Dakota replied, swiveling her chair to face him. Sorry about earlier today. Nicholas approached, taking a seat on a nearby bench. No need to apologize. In fact, maybe she did you a favor by bringing up what we've been avoiding discussing. Nicholas, Dakota began, but he gently held up his hand. Let me talk, he asked softly. I've spent the last few months trying to maintain a professional balance, respecting your fears and my own. But every day it gets harder to ignore how I feel about you. The silence that followed was heavy with possibilities. Dakota moved her chair closer to him, her eyes meeting his in the half-light of the laboratory. I'm afraid, she admitted, not of what I feel, of that I'm sure, but of complicating something as important as this project. What if instead of complicating it, it made us stronger? Nicholas asked, leaning forward. What if we didn't have to choose between professional and personal fulfillment? Dakota reached out, gently touching his face. The simple gesture carried the weight of months of contained emotions, of glances exchanged in meetings, of stolen moments in empty corridors. Ashley said he sees me looking at you the way I did before the competitions, she whispered, with determination and fear. But she forgot to mention the most important part, hope. Nicholas covered her hand with his, and at that moment, all the carefully constructed barriers began to crumble. They were no longer CEO and director, but simply Nicholas and Dakota, two hearts beating to the same rhythm of possibility and promise. Then let's do this right, he smiled, entwining his fingers with hers. Dakota Williams, we have dinner with me tomorrow night, not as co-workers, not to discuss projects, but as two people who want to find out where this could lead. Dakota's smile lit up her whole face. Yes, she replied simply, and in that single word was contained all the courage that had always characterized her, from her Paralympic achievements to her journey at TechVision. The moment was interrupted by the distant sound of the nightly cleaning service, a reminder of the world beyond that laboratory. But something fundamental had changed. A decision had been made, a new path chosen. As they left the building together that night, the future unfolded in front of them like an uncharted road, full of challenges and promises. And for the first time, they were both ready to walk it side by side, not just as professional partners, but as something much deeper and more meaningful. News of the relationship between TechVision CEO and the head of the Assistive Technology Division spread through the corporate corridors with the speed of a quantum chip. Some employees smiled discreetly as Nicholas and Dakota passed. Others exchanged meaningful glances during meetings. The board wanted an extraordinary meeting, Rebecca informed them, entering Dakota's office on a particularly busy morning. Apparently, some members are concerned about possible conflicts of interest. Dakota sighed, adjusting the position of her chair. It was predictable. I've already prepared a detailed report on the separation between personal and professional decisions. That shouldn't be necessary, Nicholas commented, entering the room with a folder of documents. Our work speaks for itself. The results of the first clinical trials are in. The three of them pored over the data. The pilot program with selected patients was exceeding all expectations. Emma, the girl from Minnesota, was already able to take her first steps with the exoskeleton after just 3 adaptation sessions. This is extraordinary, Rebecca murmured, looking at the progress charts. The neural adaptation rate is 40% above initial projections. A knock on the door interrupted the discussion. Dr. Rodriguez entered, his face lit up with that characteristic expression of scientific discovery. Miss Williams, Mr. Morgan, you need to see this, he said, practically vibrating with excitement. We've made a significant breakthrough in the sensory interface. The patients aren't just walking, they're starting to feel textures through the exoskeleton. Dakota quickly moved her chair towards the lab, with Nicholas and Rebecca on her heels. The screens showed complex neural patterns, demonstrating how the system was effectively transmitting tactile information to the user's brains. It changes everything, Dakota whispered, her eyes glistening with restrained tears. It's not just about mobility now, it's about complete sensory reconnection. Nicholas watched her reaction with a mixture of pride and admiration. Even after months of close contact, she still surprised him with her passion and dedication to the project. The meeting with the council was scheduled for the following afternoon. Dakota spent the night in her lab, refining presentations and organizing data, while Nicholas dealt with the political issues behind the scenes. "You should rest," he said, finding her still working at 11 p.m. "Tomorrow will be an intense day." "I can't," she replied, swiveling her chair to face him. "This project is too important to be compromised by. Well, by us." Nicholas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Dakota, our relationship doesn't compromise the project. It strengthens it. You make me want to be better, do more, achieve more." "Even so," she hesitated, The council will see what everyone else already sees," he interrupted gently. "That together we are stronger, more efficient, more innovative." The next morning, the boardroom was tense with anticipation. Dakota entered first, followed by Nicholas a few minutes later. A conscious decision to demonstrate professional independence. The presentation was meticulous. Dakota demonstrated not only the impressive technical results, but also the human impact of the project. Videos of patients from the pilot program brought tears to the eyes of even the toughest executives. "The numbers speak for themselves," she concluded. "Our success rate is unprecedented. The patents are secure, and the investors are enthusiastic. As for my relationship with Mr. Morgan," she paused, meeting his eyes across the table, "it has only strengthened my commitment to the excellence of this project." The silence that followed was broken by Margaret Foster, who smiled softly. "Darling, no one here is questioning your competence or dedication. We were just concerned about outward appearances. But your results," she gestured to the presentation screens, "speak louder than any speculation." The tension in the room gradually dissipated, replaced by lively discussions about expanding the program in new research possibilities. Dakota felt the weight of the world leave her shoulders, allowing herself to finally relax. After the meeting, as the council members dispersed, Nicholas discreetly approached her chair. "Dinner to celebrate?" "Better than that." She smiled, her eyes shining with that intensity he loved so much. "I want to show you something in the lab first." In the familiar space of the lab, Dakota transferred to the latest exoskeleton. "Remember when you saw me dance here for the first time?" she asked, activating the system. "Well, now I can do that." With a grace that defied technology, she began to move to the sound of imaginary music. But this time, there was something different, an even greater fluidity, a deeper connection between machine and movement. "The new sensory system," she explained, seeing the admiration in his eyes. "I can feel the ground beneath my feet, the temperature of the air, the texture of the surfaces." Nicholas approached, holding out his hand. "Can I have this dance?" The moment their hands touched was electric. It wasn't just Dakota feeling through the exoskeleton. It was two hearts beating in perfect sync, two souls finding their common rhythm. "I think I've finally found my perfect balance," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder as they danced slowly. "Between technology and humanity?" he asked softly. "Between professional and personal dreams," she corrected, smiling. "Between being a scientist and a woman, between leading and loving." Night fell softly over Austin, but in the Tech Vision lab, two people continued to dance, proving that sometimes the greatest technological advances and the most profoundly human moments can coexist in perfect harmony. The morning sunlight flooded the Tech Vision lab as Dakota adjusted the last parameters of the exoskeleton. 6 months had passed since the tense meeting with the council, and the project had flourished beyond the most optimistic expectations. "We have special visitors today," Nicholas announced, entering the lab with a beaming smile. "Emma and her family have just arrived from Minnesota." Dakota felt her heart race. Emma, the 12-year-old girl who had been one of the first patients in the pilot program, had become a living symbol of the impact of his work. "Dakota," Emma's excited voice echoed through the lab as she entered, walking confidently in her customized exoskeleton, decorated with unicorn stickers. Her steps were firm, natural, as if the technology were an extension of her own body. "Look at you," Dakota exclaimed, moving his chair to hug the girl. "Your movements are even more fluid." "She never stops dancing at home," Emma's mother commented, discreetly wiping away a tear. "Yesterday, we caught her trying to pirouette in the backyard." The morning passed in a series of tests and adjustments, with Emma proudly demonstrating each new move she had mastered. Dr. Jean and his team were collecting precious data on the long-term adaptation of the neural system. "Did you know I'm going to take part in the school talent show?" Emma shared over lunch. "I'm going to dance ballet. The teacher said she's never seen anything like it." Dakota exchanged a meaningful glance with Nicholas. This was exactly the kind of transformation they had dreamed of bringing about. Not just mobility, but freedom to dream and achieve. "I've got something to show you," Dakota said to Emma after lunch, guiding her to a private area of the lab. "It's a prototype of the next generation exoskeleton. How about being the first to test it out?" The girl's eyes sparkled with excitement as the technical team transferred the system. The new model was even lighter, more responsive, with an improved neural interface that promised an even more natural connection between user and machine. It's like I can feel the wind on my feet," Emma whispered in amazement, taking her first steps with the new equipment. Nicholas watched the scene with pride, not just for the technological advance, but for the extraordinary woman who had made it all possible. Dakota was in her element, explaining each new feature with a perfect blend of technical precision and human warmth. Later, after Emma and her family had left, Dakota found a quiet moment in her living room. The once empty walls now displayed photos of the program's patients, each image telling a story of transformation and hope. "Penny for your thoughts," Nicholas said softly, entering the room with 2 cups of coffee. "I was thinking about how everything is changed," she replied, accepting the drink. "Not just a project, but us. Who would have thought that receptionist developing an exoskeleton in her garage would find not only professional success, but love?" he added, his gentle smile lighting up his eyes. "Yes," she smiled back, "although I still find it surreal at times." Nicholas knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Dakota Williams, you've transformed not only the lives of dozens of people with your technology, but you've transformed my life with your heart. And speaking of transformations," he hesitated briefly, "I have something to ask you." Dakota's heart stopped for a moment when he took a small box out of his pocket. Inside was a delicate ring, with a design reminiscent of electronic circuits interwoven in white gold. "I had it specially made," he explained, his voice trembling slightly, "to represent how technology and love can intertwine perfectly. Dakota, would you do me the honor of—" "Yes," she exclaimed, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "1,000 times yes." The moment was interrupted by applause. The entire team had gathered discreetly at the door of the room, with Dr. Jean leading the celebrations. Rebecca was teary-eyed, while Ashley, who had apparently been complicit in the surprise, excitedly took photos. "Now I can tell you the other surprise," Nicholas smiled after the initial commotion had passed. "The Gates Foundation has offered a partnership to take the exoskeleton to developing countries. They want you to lead the project globally." Dakota was speechless, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. In less than a year, her life had been transformed in ways she had never imagined possible. That evening, after everyone had left, Dakota and Nicholas remained in the laboratory, dancing slowly with the help of the exoskeleton, as they had done so many times before. But now there was something different in the air, a promise of the future, a feeling of completeness. "You know what's funny?" she murmured against his shoulder. "I spent years developing technology to help people move, but it was you who taught me how to really dance with life." Nicholas pulled her closer, their hearts beating in perfect sync. "And you taught me that the greatest innovations don't just come from technology, but from the heart." As night fell over Austin, the Tech Vision lab continued to be illuminated, not just by the lights of the equipment, but by the glow of 2 souls who had found, in each other, the perfect combination of dream and reality, of innovation and love. And so, in the midst of circuits, codes, and promises of the future, Dakota and Nicholas discovered that sometimes humanity's greatest advances are not just in the machines we build, but in the bridges we create between hearts.